Today, I am touring the Soudan Mine, which is Minnesota's oldest and deepest iron ore mine. It was operated by the United States Steel Corporation until 1962, where it was sold to the state of Minnesota for $1 in order for it to be preserved and operated as a state park. Just want to give a huge shout out to the state park for taking us on a little tour during their off season. And I just want to note that this video is not sponsored or paid for in any way. The guy in the visitor's house definitely thinks I'm insane. So these rocks that I'm sitting on here are basically extinct. Now I know what you're thinking, Jess. Rocks can't be extinct. But they can. Rocks like these will never be seen again. People are driving past and looking at me like I'm nuts, which I probably am, but here we are. So I'm here today in northern Minnesota, sitting on the Sudan Iron Formation, which was formed about 2.5 billion years ago. So how does that make them extinct? Well, most rocks that we see are pretty much still being formed today in the same way that they were billions of years ago. However, these rocks here in this particular formation type, seen here in northern Minnesota and a couple other places in the world, will never be seen again because the environment that they were formed in no longer exists. What we have now is basically all we've got. The story of these rocks begins a little over 2.5 billion years ago, long before dinosaurs or even multicellular organisms. This area of Minnesota was covered by a warm, shallow sea. Not what you're seeing today. However, this shallow sea was full of dissolved minerals. As the first teeny tiny photosynthetic bacteria evolved, they began emitting oxygen as a byproduct. This suddenly oxidized the abundant dissolved iron in the water, causing it to rapidly precipitate to the seafloor in alternating bands with silica. After a long period of deep burial and heating, these banded sediments compressed into these unimaginatively named banded iron formations, or BIFs. These distinctive banding patterns of red jasper and metallic gray hematite reveal cycles in the ancient ocean's chemistry. These may look like just rocks. However, they provide vital clues to help geologists unravel the oxygenation of the Earth's atmosphere, which paved the way for more complex life forms, like humans, to eventually evolve. In the late 1880s, prospectors discovered that the banded iron formations contained over 50% iron content. Across the region, mines began to open to extract this precious commodity. The ore was extracted and shipped all over the growing American industries to help build It's so cold. To help build city skyscrapers, manufacturing, jewelry, and even your grandmother's beloved cast irons. This early mining kickstarted the culture and communities across the Iron Range. By the 1950s, much of the high-grade hematite ore was depleted, but vast reserves of lower-grade magnetite ore remained in the banded rocks. New processing methods allowed crushing and concentrating of this taconite into high-grade pellets. This innovation saved Minnesota's iron mining industry and led to massive open-pit mines across the state that dominate the landscape today.
With the new processes, it opened the door to other grades of ore, and we very quickly fell out of favor. By 1962, couldn't compete. So there's lots of material here that people used to call ore. It's just too expensive.
And Sudan Underground Mine was producing some of the richest iron ore in the world. Ore that would be converted to steel for our automobiles, our farm equipment, even our toys.
On the surface, a bustling above-ground city took shape. The engine house rumbled as steam hoists lowered men and lifted ore. The deafening crusher pulverized rock night and day. For every 4 tons crushed, 1 pure ton of ore was extracted. The state park contains several original buildings and pieces of equipment, including the headframe, the engine house, pressure house, drill shop, dry house, and machine shop.
It is 20 below today, if you can't tell by the steam rising out of the shaft behind me. All right, so behind me here is the Soudan Mine headframe. This 90-foot steel tower stands over the number 8 shaft. This was the only shaft that was used for ore production in the final years of the Soudan Mine. And I think this is what we're going to go down today, so I'm pretty excited.
This was the third headframe for this shaft. However, there are 13 shafts on the property. Visitors today start the tour descending in a cage, much like the miners did back in the day. The hoist that transports the cages is powered by an electric motor and more than 6,000 total feet of cable. From 1901 until the end of active mining in 1962, the Sudan Mine was owned by the United States Steel Corporation's Oliver Iron Mining Division. By 1912, the mine was at a depth of 1,250 feet. When the mine closed, level 27 was being developed at 2,341 feet below surface, and the entire underground workings consisted of more than 50 miles of drifts, adits, and raises. In 1965, U.S. Steel donated the Soudan Mine to the state of Minnesota to use for educational purposes as a state park. In the 1980s, scientists from the University of Minnesota began to develop the Sudan Mine as a site for sensitive physics experiments because of the very low rate of cosmic rays in the deep underground site, and also because they could inexpensively use the still operating mine hoist. The mine was proposed as one possible site for a U.S. Deep Underground Science and Engineering Laboratory, but that project was instead awarded to the Homestake Mine in South Dakota. The laboratory operated from the 1980s to 2016. In the underground lab is a massive mural. Artist Joseph Gianetti was commissioned to create an image which would symbolize the work at the Sudan laboratory. This mural contains elements symbolizing the formation and expansion of the universe, the history of neutrinos, and the scientists who have been involved in the search to understand them. The mural also celebrates the Sudan Mine and the generations of Minnesota miners who provided iron ore as an essential ingredient of American industry. This mural took several months. It required 25 gallons of primer and 50 gallons of paint to create. Today, the Sudan Mine in Lake Vermilion State Park welcomes visitors to immerse themselves in this bygone era. Tours are operated seasonally, with off-season tours offered upon request. So what can you expect if you visit? The temperature of the mine is a constant 51 degrees Fahrenheit. This was really nice during this cold winter day that I visited. A light jacket and sturdy shoes are recommended. Something I thought was really interesting was that this tour was actually ADA accessible. There were wheelchair ramps and actually elevators underground to help with this. No bags or strollers are allowed underground, which makes sense when you see how tight the cage fit is. The park also has over 5 miles of hiking trails. Tour guides bring the past alive through the vivid stories of the miners who spent their days far below the surface of the earth. The ore is no longer mined in Sudan. Its legacy persists in the weathered buildings, stoic rock walls, and tales transporting us through time. The depths echo with the remnants of the hard hat era that defined Minnesota's Iron Range.